I'm always struck by
How backward
how,
we are relative to other countries in terms of infrastructure. Yeah, me too.
yeah. And I was curious, like within the big bucket of infrastructure, where do you think we need to kind of catch up the most? Is it transportation? Is it power? Is it communications? Like what do you think are the most important pieces of that puzzle?
Well, the first things are the structures that actually keep us safe every day in our commutes. I think the engineers gave us a D plus in infrastructure. A lot of it's decaying underneath our feet, and that's not just roads and bridges. That's also schools. Literally crumbling schools are a problem. So job number one is keep us safe, and I believe the infrastructure deficit we've built up is something like $4 trillion. Like the engineers give us a D plus and say, hey, it would cost about $4 trillion to upgrade us. Now, the wonderful thing about investing in infrastructure is you get that money back in efficiencies over time. Like if I manage to cut your commute by half an hour a day, and you do that for everyone in that metro area, and then you multiply that out, like, eventually you get those billions of dollars back. So that to me is number one, is things that keep us physically safe and you get high economic return. So that's roads, bridges. Transportation, I'm a big fan of too. I'm a train guy, and when you talk about when you go to other countries, you're like, how the heck are these trains like decades ahead of American trains? And then when you find an American train, I mean, we haven't really built up the usage rates or the traffic patterns to like make them make sense in the same way that they make sense in other countries. So that is a chicken or egg problem in the U.S. I will say I've seen in other parts of the world where you can go the equivalent of New York to D.C. in like an hour and a half, let's say. And then it gives rise to whole new communities because all of a sudden you can commute into downtown. Let's call it DC in this hypothetical, which is obviously very much a hypothetical. But if you commute into downtown DC in 45 minutes from, 60, 70, 80 miles away, then you end up with like a whole new community that develops. And then how do you measure that value? Like right now, that would go to the hands of developers and property owners. And it would in part pay for some of the transportation infrastructure that we could use. Communications, the biggest thing is that we need to create financial incentives to wire everyone on broadband, get it up to like 99.8% or 99.9%, because there's not a financial incentive for private companies to wire homes in rural areas right now. To the extent you have a broadband gap, it's always rural areas where they did the math and we're like, hey, it doesn't pay. And so the government has to say, look, we'll subsidize that, get the broadband penetration rate up to 99% plus, with the big caveat that sometimes politicians go around saying, if I can wire a rural area, then they'll all have the jobs of the future. And that's not really the way it works. If I get you broadband, it just means you can watch videos faster and stuff. But it doesn't mean you're going to all of a sudden become like the, next Bill Gates
Valley. Yeah.
But we should wire everyone as quickly as possible. And there's no reason that we can't put some resources in place to make that worth someone's while.
And as someone who's spent a lot of time in the last few years in Zurich, I love a great train. So I share your desire for a more efficient train system, or at least that as an option for more of us. And now I just drove this morning on the 101 in the Bay Area. That's a different experience.
Yeah, it's a zoo, man. I actually like if you're literally inventing the future, as so many people in Silicon Valley are, and then you get in your car and you're like, what is going on?
I mean, it's literally like for some people that work here in tech, like a quarter of their day is in a car, and that's like productive time lost. But yeah, hopefully we'll make some progress on there. Moving on.